Hey, it's the Profit Answer Man, Rocky Lalvani. If you're new to the podcast, check out my interview with Mike Michalowicz. It's episode number 2. If you want to hear about each chapter in the Profit First book, go back and listen to episodes 3 through 13. Episode 1 is the why and how. On the Profit Answer Man, we learn money mastery without all the complicated accounting mumbo-jumbo using a simple system. Your accountant is busy documenting your transactions and creating a rearview mirror of what happened. My guess is you don't even look at the reports they sent you. If you're like most business owners, you struggle with this, and it's not your fault. We aren't taught money in school, and accountants aren't taught how to be profitable. The Profit First system created by Mike Michalowicz works, and he certified me to help you implement the system in your business. Remember, the new equation is sales minus profit equals expenses. Let's face it, without cash flow, you can't pay your employees, buy needed materials, or pay your mortgage and support your family. I help you to do that and more, so you can focus on the parts of the business you love and receive the rewards for your labor and investment into your business. The stronger you are as a business owner, the more jobs you create, the better we are as a country. Small business owners are the backbone of America, and for that, you deserve to be well rewarded. Just remember, more revenue does not equal more profit. That's why we focus on the bottom line. Today, I'm going to do something out of the ordinary. You may know that I have another podcast called Richer Soul, where we talk about life beyond money. Today, I'm going to release this week's episode on Richer Soul here because I think you would benefit from learning from Chris's entrepreneurial journey, but also realize that there is so much more to business in life, and we need to create that harmony. Chris Michael Harris is founder of Startup U, an interactive online learning platform that teaches entrepreneurs how to take an idea or an existing business and turn it into a highly successful plus profitable company. Chris is the entrepreneur in residence for Silicon Valley-based accelerator program, Founder Institute. Chris is also the host of Entrepreneur Hour, a podcast that has trended as high as the top 5 worldwide on iTunes under business, health, and education. Having founded, bootstrapped, and scaled multiple 7 figures in his mid to late 20s, Chris's dreams of building a business came to abrupt halt when he received a terrible lab result just weeks shy of his 30th birthday. Looking at the possibility of cancer and a significant shortened life, Chris immersed himself in health and wellness, treating and eventually reversing his chronic condition over the next 4 years, but doing so through natural remedies and lifestyle and dietary changes. Chris is now focused on helping people redefine what success looks like and how to achieve it while treating yourself like a performance athlete. Let's check out the Richer Soul episode of this week. Welcome to Richer Soul, Chris Michael Harris. It's great to have you join us today.
Rocky, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
And I'm excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Yeah, it's tough. It's funny because my family kind of taught me the opposite of, at least my father did, of what I was learning in school. And so he was, direct sales, mission-based, salary, but I kind of always had a different perspective as far as like value creation, I guess. Maybe not necessarily calling it value creation, but certainly outside of your traditional 9 to 5, right? Like you're rewarded based off of your effort. You're rewarded based off of your results. And so that's what I grew up in, a results-based, results-oriented. If I was, during the summer months, rather than hang out with my friends, my dad was always pushing me to explore ways I could make money. He's like, if you're not playing sports, you need to be making money, or vice versa, right? So he was always very fair in that way. And that started from, very early fifth grade, mowing my neighbor's lawns and making $2,000 to $3,000 over the summer, while again, my friends are just hanging out. So very strong work ethic, but also very results oriented. You can make as much as you're willing to put in, which again doesn't necessarily align with a lot of what my friends were learning, which is you go to school, you get a good education, and hopefully somebody's willing to give you money in exchange for all of this knowledge and wisdom that you've accumulated. So that helped me out a lot. And I don't think at the time, and up until recently, if I'm being quite candid, we really knew that entrepreneurship was like a viable career path, right? So when I started like my first official business, which I know we want to touch on, it was considered at that point still like, why would you do that? like why? Like you went to a good school, you got a good education, like you have this great job. Why would you take that risk? Now it's become more mainstream and it's much more attractive. And now with everything going on in the world, specifically right now, I think people are starting, there's a little bit of risk reversal going on where it's like, wow, so you can have this thing you create for yourself versus this job that may or may not exist unless you're considered an essential worker. So it's really fascinating to watch what else happened in the world. But to answer your question more succinctly, for me, it was absolutely not necessarily through the guise of entrepreneurship, but absolutely taught and brought up in a work hard, create your own wealth environment.
You know, it's funny. People think about this whole path of getting a job as being without risk. But the reality is when you have a job, your entire paycheck is dependent on someone else.
Right.
And, you know, when I got out of college, you worked for the same company. At least that's what I was told for your entire life. Yep. Those rules don't apply anymore. Like today, companies will fire you left and right without blinking an eye. And so having a job means all of your income is tied to one source. Yeah. And so to me, that seems extremely high risk. And someone else is determining your value. Now, there are people who are smart enough to say, hey, they're going to jump around. They're going to figure out how to earn more. But at the same point, you have to know how to run a business and understand what it means to run a business. And if you can do that, you can dramatically reduce risk. Right. I don't think everyone learns that because we're not taught those things, right? I know they have entrepreneurship in college now, which I laugh at. I'm like, why would you pay $200,000 to learn to be an entrepreneur? Why don't you just take 50 grand and go start, right? Like, So let's talk about it because you have that early business journey. Would you share that with us?
Yeah. So I'm in college and kind of continuing on that path of like understanding, going out and creating opportunity for yourself. Actually, from mowing lawns in elementary school and high school, we actually kind of continued more of the same. A friend of mine and I did, and we actually made I think like $16,000 over the course of my summer between junior and senior year of high school. Now I get to college, and one of those opportunities in high school that came up, half of that revenue of that $16,000. Was actually a moving request. So an elderly couple had a really bad experience with a big box brand moving company from Michigan to Georgia, where I lived at the time. And they just wanted a different experience, right? Like using kids that were the same age as their grandkids and like helping them, get ready for college or what have you. Did a really good job. Had never done a move before. Did a really good job with them. And so I get to college and I'm doing all these different side hustles, right? I'm doing personal training. I actually have a crazy story about how a friend of mine and I went to New York City the day after, on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, and bought $43,000 worth of clothes at Saks Fifth Avenue and flipped it and made $84,000. Crazy story. That's the high level. I'll give you that. That's the sneak peek of that story. So again, I'm doing all these side things, right? But not really like this is a real viable career path for me. Just this is how I'm paying my way through school versus flipping hamburgers and making burritos, right? So moving kind of popped back into the equation again, right? I knew there was an opportunity. I saw these girls moving this, big fold-out sofa down the hallway, one of those big iron frame ones. So my brother and I kind of grabbed him, helped out. Mom tipped us $50 a piece. We're like, this is fantastic. Like, this is great money. This is more we would have made in a couple days working at, again, said burrito joint or flipping burgers. So we create this little flyer, go up to the lease office manager. She hangs it up in the lease office. Next thing you know, we made $8,000 to $10,000 in like 45 days, just moving 30% of that building. I mean, it was a big, sizable chunk of that building we moved, word of mouth in that flyer. So kind of going on here, I graduate, go off, get a quote unquote real job. Actually was working, that straight commission sales job like my father had, actually for the same company. Brother continues doing this moving side hustle thing. They made $23,000 the next summer. So I'm like, we've got something here. So things were kind of what I thought them to be, even at straight commission. 9 to 5 just didn't resonate with me. Didn't agree with the direction the company was taking. I was 10 years ahead of where they should have been, which actually is where they are now. I'm not saying that to be boastful. I'm just saying entrepreneurs, I think sometimes we see things before they actually unfold. So I'm like, this is it. I can't do this. If I can't even do straight commission, I'm just going to do my own thing, right? And very painfully, I just jumped into that business full time. Despite the fact that we did $48,000 within about 6 to 8 months thereafter, I was having to support myself and the business, which is very challenging. Like, growth requires cash. In a low margin business, like a laborious industry, like the moving industry, you're going to be hurting still. Knew I had to make it happen. Really, really painfully kind of put the pieces together. I teach people how to make that transition more successfully and seamlessly now. Fortunately, we were very blessed and lucky. Actually grew from year 1 to year 2 from 48,000 to $500,000, just shy, 484,000 to be precise. And then the next year, so by the beginning of year 3, we hit $1.2 million. So I'm in my mid 20s with a at this point 7-figure plus business. I've got hundreds of part-time employees, college students that are doing moving jobs. We're also doing installation work, so fully furnished student housing, like apartments. Think, you show up and all your stuff's already provided for you, like glorified IKEA furniture. Well, beyond the point of sale, these manufacturers were hiring us to do the installation work. We were in 32 states doing those. They could be as large as 12,000 pieces of furniture, and we're installing it over the course of 6 months. I mean, these were massive, massive assignments. So very quickly, I went from young kid and have no idea what I want to do with my life, right, to, wow, I've got a multi-million-dollar company and I'm taking red eyes and driving across the country to get to these assignments in a timely manner so we can fulfill all the ways that I almost sold us to death. Literally, I mean that seriously, to keep up with growth. So we can touch on the specific nuances of that. That's the high level of my first official business venture.
So let's take that quick step back. You talked about, was it $84,000 flipping, what was it, clothes or something else that you did on?
So Black Friday, it's wild, man. So I had a friend that had a friend, right? One of those situations. He was one of the top salesmen at Neiman Marcus in Atlanta, actually in the Buckhead location. And he had a connection at the actual Saks Fifth Avenue in New York City. So he's 22, I'm 20. I'm still in college. He just finished college, right? He's kind of one of my first early mentors. So William, the guy, his friend in Atlanta, said, hey, here's the deal. If you guys go up there, I've already talked to him. He's going to pull some items aside for you. My friend had already been flipping clothes on eBay at this point in time. So he already kind of knew the rundown, and he knew all, the items that would sell, the items to look for, this and that. So we go up there, we get in early. They let us in the back door at Saks, and they're like still doing like the team powwow meetings because they knew Black Friday was going to be wild. It was going to be a madhouse, right? So we're in there like an hour before they even open. They're pulling items aside for us. I'm talking like $12,000 scarves, $18,000 like gator skin handbags. I mean, just stuff like, who in the world will want this stuff? Like, it's just outrageously excessive. But they're like, this will sell. And the problem is that with high-end fashion, designer fashion, when it goes out of season, it's worth, like, that's the thing. You have to keep up with the trends, right? So you're always the next thing. So Black Friday, they're trying to dump things. So they'll do 25 to 50% off. At least they did at the time. I don't know if they still do this. And then if you spend over $3,000, the kicker was you get an additional 15 to 25% plus free shipping to and from if you want to return it, plus 1 year, no interest, no payments, right? So effectively, if you take it back and you put it on eBay and you can't sell within 30 days, guess what? You send it back, get your money back, no problem, no big deal. Or if you can sell half of it, right? Well, eBay at the time, men's retail, or any retail specifically on eBay at that time, was going for about 50% MSRP. So let's do the math. We're getting 25 to 50% off if you're on select items, plus if you spend over $3,000, which we did, $3,000 with that credit card, you get an additional 15 to 25% off. So we're getting anywhere from 65 to 75% off. Sales on eBay for 50% of MSRP. So do the math, you're doubling up if you pick select items. So we picked those items selectively, put them on eBay, bought $43,000 worth of clothing, and ended up coming home, selling on eBay. Within about a matter of 2.5 weeks, sold it all, cleared it all out. He actually kept some. He kept some things, and I kept something. I kept like a wallet or something, like a gator skin wallet or something like that. But yeah, I made $84,000. He actually took that money and rolled it into a high-end used car dealership in Atlanta, which is still in business today. He sells all like Bugattis and all kind of crazy stuff. He's a hustler, man. So that to me was a really eye-opening experience. It's a fun story, but it also showed me like I'm 20 years old. He's 22. We just made more in 2.5 weeks than some people make in an entire year as college kids, just leveraging credit, just leveraging debt, right, and just being creative with opportunities. And most people, the fact of the matter is they just didn't want to have to go to New York and do all that hustle legwork. So they're willing to get still 50% off if we go do the work and actually pick those items for it. So it was a win-win all the way around, and it just taught me a lot, right? He told me this. He said credit is key, or cash is king, but credit is crucial. That's what he said. And I was like, wow, that really stuck with me. So learned a lot of lessons from that story. Is, like I said, as fun as it was and as wild as that adventure was, I didn't even tell my mom I was going to New York. I'm 20, they're, helping me through school. And I call her, I'm like, hey mom, downtown. She's like, yeah, I can tell. I'm like, in Times Square. She's like, what? There's no time. And I'm like, yeah, New York. So I didn't even tell my parents I went to New York, which is just wild and crazy stuff, man. Wild and crazy.
It's amazing the opportunities that are out there to make money if you try, but it also came down to networking, right? Because you had to get in the back door. Yeah. You had to have the ability to be able to do that so that you were ahead of the line. Otherwise, it doesn't necessarily work out.
Could have, but it would have been more challenging, right? Like we needed some insider information. Like people were like, can I do that? I'm like, well, you kind of really need to know like what people are buying because they're there every day. The guy at Saks, I don't remember the person's name at this point. It was 10, 12 years ago. But he knew what was hot, trending, what people wanted. Without that, unless I just studied that industry intensively, you're right, I wouldn't have known. But yeah, those exist. And here's the deal. This was 08, 09, 2010 range. It's more prevalent now, ways to make money, than it was even then, right? So to your point about it's never been easier, I would agree with you tenfold now, because that was the beginning of all this crazy digital age that we can take advantage of.
It's so true. It reminded me of a story. I remember when my kids were little, so this is going back probably 15 plus years. Local store was going out of business. And they were selling this electronic item. Literally, I bought them for $1 a piece. And I put them on eBay, and I was getting $40 to $60 a piece for them.
Nice.
And it's just knowing the arbitrage of when somebody is looking to get rid of something and putting it into a marketplace where all of a sudden now you have global reach. Now, the thing is, either you have to price it correctly on the buy, or you have to find things that are hard to get versus a commodity item. Because commodity items on eBay and Amazon are low margin and you're going to get crushed.
Right.
So what happened with the moving company? You blew it up, big business, and...
Blew it up, got a $7.2 million valuation. We're in the middle of a Series A. For those who don't know what that is, that's the first round of institutional funding. So we hadn't raised $1 to this point, right? Everything we had done was painful growth, because growth requires cash, which is the biggest misconception people have about growth. They're like, well, let's just keep selling. Yeah, that, like I said, almost sold us to death because growth requires cash, right? And when my business coach tells me between like $500,000 to like $3 million, depending on the business, right? Depends on the business you're in. If you have an online business with low overheads, probably not the case. It's a little bit different. But there is a point where you're in what's called no man's land, right? Where you're still a small business with a startup with startup resources, but you're technically doing enough revenue to be requiring things that an established small business needs to have, like insurance, the overhead, salaried employees, things of that nature, right? We had reached that point and then some, and I was stretching myself ridiculously thin, right? The 18, 20-hour days were starting to really add up. Knew that I was having some really serious health issues. Started to kind of feel those further manifest. Just kept ignoring it, right? You're in your mid-20s. You're like, I'm invincible. Just keep doing this. Girlfriend, she was girlfriend at the time, was like, this is gonna blow up in your face. She was like anticipating a phone call about, a nervous breakdown or some serious health issue, because I just kept plowing through. I mean, I wasn't even eating. I always say this, and I hate giving this example because there's more to it than that, and I'll get to that in a second. And we're going to talk about my health journey. But I always give this metaphor. We would never, if I told somebody like, here's the deal, you're going to give your business expected to grow the equivalents of beer and pizza, right? Like that's what you're going to feed your business. Like people would be like, why would I give my business such terrible resources? Like that'd be a really bad idea. And I'm like, well, look at what startup founders do. They're just whatever they can put in their body. And on the weekends, they just have to disengage. And so they just go get drunk all weekend, or they go, whatever they need to do. I'm like, you're giving yourself literally the opposite of what you just said you would give your business, right? And so that was me. Like I was drinking Monster Energies all day and not eating food or just putting my hands on whatever I could eat, right? It's just not a good situation. So anyways, so by May or June, it was my birthday. It was around my 29th birthday or 30th birthday, one of the two. Finally got to the point where it was so bad, not to be TMI, but for people to kind of recognize or understand where I was at. 1 to 2 movements a month, and I mean bowel movements, was like becoming normal, right? Like I had to take heavy cleansers to be able to be normal and regular. I was shutting down internally, and I'll get into those reasons as to why here in a little bit. So doctors finally I'm more of a functional medicine believer than I am in terms of like conventional, Western medicine. And again, we'll talk about that. Basically, they're like, if you continue on this path, all the labs we ran, we had $2,000 for the labs. Everything was a disaster. Deficient across the board. Iodine on my urinalysis, saliva analysis, 00. So my thyroid just wasn't functioning. Again, I wasn't having movements. It was just, I had dysbiosis to such severity. They said they've never seen a case that bad for someone my age in 35 years of practice. Like that's how bad things were getting. I was down to 5 foods that I can eat that my body could tolerate without a crazy inflammatory response. So there was a plethora of things that were going on, but basically to kind of summarize quickly here, business imploded when I couldn't go anymore. Within a matter of 9 months, the business was just gone. And now on top of that, I had, taken all these bridge loans and like done all these things. And there were some other incidents and accidents that came to fruition. I had several lawsuits on my hands. And so my lawyer's like, look, at this point in time, you're more so focused on defense than you are actually growing this business. The business is closed. Like you have to really, at this point, defend yourself. That's what I did. So I went back to the drawing board. It's like, what do I do here? I'm terribly sick. I'm crazy depressed. I lost everything that I had worked for. What do I do from here? And so painful to learn the hard way. I always told myself I didn't want to be the guy that taught people on failure, right? I wanted to be everybody says like failure is a requirement in startup entrepreneurship. And I never wanted to be that guy. Learned a lot from it, but yeah, really challenging time in my life for sure.
And, that happens a lot with business. Everyone is focused on the top line. And in the beginning, you're told you got to work. And I don't know that it's necessarily true. I think we chase too much, and learning to slow down and do things at I'm not going to say leisurely pace, but a life-fulfilling pace where you can have some sort of harmony, I think really is helpful. So what happened how did you get through the health crisis, and what was it that you learned from that? Yeah.
Something you said I want to highlight real quick because I think it's important. Damon John told me something when he came on my show that has stuck with me ever since he said it, but he said, you want to take affordable steps. So it kind of aligns with what you just said, Rocky, where I think we all want the Mark Zuckerberg story of explosive growth and global reach and all this stuff. And I'm not saying you can't achieve that. You just have to recognize that sales is not the only lever, right? Like there are other levers in a business. It's a matter of getting to a point where you can continue to put resources around you, not getting to the point where happiness and success is the destination. That's a fundamentally completely different approach to a business. Rampant growth is possible. We're not sitting here telling you, just grow your business 5% year over year for the next 30, 40 years. That's not who I am. It's not. I love blowing things up. I love exploding things. I love growing things. I'm still doing that today. There's just, I have boundaries because type A driven people, we will do it at our own detriment, like just by design. Like that's just who we are. So you just have to make sure that understand what your growth trajectory is going to require and make sure that you have the resources aligned, right, to be able to do those various things. I waited way too long to raise funding. I waited way too long to put resources around me. I put way too much on myself. So you just have to take it with a more calculated approach and focus on how can I build this business without me involved, right? Like what can I do where everything's not riding on my shoulders, and or do what we call now, which is called demon mode, right? Which is what happens if you're removed from the equation, or what happens if these potential things that could happen to your business actually happen, and how are you prepared? Do you have plans, contingency plans for those various things to happen? So going to the health related thing.
Hang on, before you get to so right now I'm reading Who Not How.
Yeah.
And that is literally, because that is the secret, I think, of entrepreneurship is
I agree.
Not that you do everything, but you find people who are going to help you do it. because you can't be an expert in everything. The second thing, and we talk about this a lot with business valuations, if you are integral to the business becomes far less valuable.
Right.
Because you're the stumbling block. So you got to get out of the way. Very much so. And I think even Zuckerberg, like, I don't remember the exact story, but Facebook was in a point where they needed to make a major decision. Zuckerberg went away for 6 weeks. He went on a walkabout, gone, so that he could have the time and the space to think.
Yeah.
Which is what we all miss out. But back to your health story.
Yeah. So it was just that. It forced me, the health journey, it forced me to realize, like, I have to learn a new approach, I have to learn a new way, I have to learn a new everything, right? Like, and I had really had a huge identity crisis around all that because, like I said, I was Chris, the successful entrepreneur. And we in Western culture, that's, you are your name, and then immediately after, what do you say? What I do, in many cases, right? So I had to relearn a lot of that. I was no longer Chris, I felt like an imposter, I felt like a fraud, right? Specifically now, I'd launched the podcast around this time, and by luck or by fate or by research or whatever, we had hit new and noteworthy status at the time on iTunes. We're top 5 business, health, and education. Again, that's when we started reaching out to the Damons and the Barbara Corcorans and the Grant Cardones and started to acquire some really big guests on the show. And it was great because it was therapeutic. So let's approach that side of it first, the mental aspect of the health crisis. Phenomenal way, immerse yourself in other people's journeys, right? Like, successful people, there are, I wouldn't say there's necessarily predictable patterns, but there's certainly breadcrumbs, right? And so I was finding, like, here I was thinking that I was this only person that had been through this and never been sued for a business before, or never had this crisis, or never had and as I talked to these people, Rocky, the common denominator I was seeing was they had all been through that, and in many cases worse. So that really normalized it and just told me that, like, people like me, this is that just are that type of, have the potential to create massive growth out of nothing. There's growing pains, right? Not growing pleasures involved with that. This was part of those growing pains. So that really helped me normalize what I was going through a lot. On the physical side of things, my father's a Crohn's sufferer. For those who don't know what that is, it's an autoimmune disease, specifically with the digestive system. I watched him go through the prednisone route. I watched him go through the ups and downs and the restricted diet and all these various things, and, like, really struggle. I've never known him to not be struggling with his health, or literally, with autoimmune diseases, the problem is you just can't fight anything off. So if he would travel, it was like a guarantee that he was going to come home with something. He was going to be sick, right? You're exposed to things all the time. Your body can fight it off because that's what your body does. You have an autoimmune disease, now you're really struggling to do those things, right? Like a normal person. So really watched him go through that, wasn't interested in that route. Decided to go the natural course of action, right? So that's an entirely different journey because there's not much of that information out there. There's a lot, immediately people are probably thinking, a lot of people are probably thinking, oh, that's quackery, that's this, that's that, or whatever. And there are a lot out there, right? Like any industry, there's a lot of bad eggs out there. People that, I see some stuff and I'm like, good God, I can't believe you're actually teaching this to people. But that's the same with any industry, right? I would say the same thing about people teaching people how to start a business. Doesn't mean they were all that way. So kind of came into functional medicine, like the hybrid between MD, right, medical doctor, and functional medicine. I think it's a good way to go because there's certain criteria they have to align themselves with, in addition to learning some of the alternative medicine remedies and things of that nature. But they can also, there's more tools in the toolkit, right? So we started to just go after it. And it took a lot of lifestyle and dietary changes and lifestyle changes and all these various, aspects of my life I had to relearn. Rampant supplementation, things of that nature. So it took me 4 years. It took me full 4 years to achieve what I would call, and many people would call, normalcy, where I would actually be able to work a full work day, push myself, really be focused on actually building again and not having to manage my health minute by minute. That's where we were. Now, it turns out, and maybe some people are curious about maybe what this would look like in their own life if they do have some of these health issues themselves. The business build was like the needle that broke, the straw that broke the camel's back, like the final thing that, like, put things over the edge. But this had gone all the way back from birth, if we're being totally candid, right? Like only breastfed for like a week. That's a huge. So when you're young, when you're an infant, C-section babies have a problem with this, and also people that don't breastfeed have a problem with this, because you're not taking in your mother's bacteria to build your healthy microbiome, meaning the healthy community and ecosystem that lives within inside your gut. So that's a big thing. Then a heavy antibiotic usage when I was in my early years, grade school, right? I had a lot of strep throat, upper respiratory issues, taking a lot of those antibiotics. That doesn't discriminate, it depletes all of your gut bacteria, right? Then getting into high school, right? Eating the fast food, we all did that, right? You're on your way back from school, you just stop at, Wendy's and grab whatever before basketball practice, right? College, drinking 3-4 days a week, whatever that looks like, whatever college you went to, maybe it was more or less. And then the startup of continuing more of the same, but then throwing crazy stress on top of said problems you had before. So it was the perfect storm, the culmination to get to those points, right? And we know now how much, because of the vagus nerve and the gut-brain axis and how many nerve endings, there's more nerve endings in your gut than there are in your spinal column, which is crazy. But we now know the gut is like the second brain. It isn't even like, it is the second brain of the body. So it has a lot to do with how you're functioning neurologically. You're actually producing more neurotransmitters in your gut than you do in your brain, which is outrageous. Nobody thinks about that. But also, too, if you have a significant amount of inflammation, which many people do, and they call it fat, right? They think they're just overweight. In many cases, it's inflammation, not necessarily weight, or the fat that they're thinking they're losing. They kill themselves at the gym, and they're not losing weight, and that's the reason why. Now you're producing cortisol like crazy to accommodate the fact that you have, which is an anti-inflammatory, natural anti-inflammatory, to keep the gut under control, right? You burn out your adrenals, which burns out your endocrine system, which starts torching your thyroid, which messes up your hormones. So it becomes, which is exactly what happened to me, by the way. So it becomes this nasty chain reaction where you've got a plethora of issues. And then what you're doing is, it's like you're trying to plug 1,000 holes with 2 hands, like trying to fix the issue, right? And it's like, well, I'm fixing the gut, but at the same time, I have all these adrenal and thyroid issues that I can't address. So can become a really nasty, slippery slope. I would say now, with everything that I know and being under the right tutelage, working with the right people, to probably have reconciled those issues in like 18 to 24 months instead of 4 years. But it is a long and lengthy journey to recover, to win the natural route. And I could have taken another pill and just put a Band-Aid on the problem and kicked that can down the road. That probably would have led to Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or some other neurological disease, if not colon cancer, which is what the doctors thought I would develop later on down the road, probably 40, 50 years old. So tough journey, tough to find the right information. A lot of people, they're kind of walking around suboptimally in terms of health, and they don't even know it, which is the terrifying part.
And that's true. And we've had some real in-depth episodes on this very subject. Just out of curiosity, what does your diet look like today?
Yeah, so I'm really careful about telling people this because I believe in personalized, not standardized, right? So like my diet would probably look completely different than yours. So I'll tell you what mine looks like, but it's based off labs. So my number one recommendation for people is get lab work done. Now, you may say, I'm just introduced to this and I don't want to go all crazy and spend thousands of dollars. I totally get that. There's 2 that I would recommend you do right out of the gates. So the first is Viome, Viome, and that's going to have, there's also a new one called Thrive. You might have heard that as well. Either one, I don't care. It doesn't matter. I have never done Thrive. I have done Viome. You're going to get a 110-page report. It's going to tell you what's going on with your gut specifically, what foods are reacting positively, your butyrate, the way you're converting, food into energy. It's going to give you all of those things in addition to an entire, probably 50-plus page report of the foods that you should be eating versus the foods you shouldn't be eating. The reason I preface it with that, Rocky, is because if I tell people what my diet looks like and consists of, but you are developing an immunoresponse, an inflammatory response to those specific foods, mine, avocado showed up on that list, bell pepper showed up on that list, mushroom showed up on that list, right? Things that are deemed to be, and for all intents and purposes, are healthy foods. But for my specific composition, for me physiologically, from where I'm at, given the context of what I've done in my unique body, those are not foods that are advantageous for me right now. So as a general rule, I like to test, not guess. And you can do so, like the Viome test is less than $200. You do it once a year, builds you your own little meal plan for you. You can develop those, every single year and just tweak it and modify as in accordance with that. The second part I'd recommend, if you want to go a pro tip, a little step further, is to find some place. There's a place here in Austin where I live called Any Labs Test Now. So there are various labs where you can walk in and say, I want to have a male or female comprehensive test done, right? So male comp or female comp is what you could call it. Don't know exactly what you're talking about. That's going to give you everything, all of your markers, right, at a high level. There's some thyroid metrics that I wish were a little bit deeper that just gives you THS, but I think you need to be a little bit deeper, like reverse T3 and all these various aspects. But we're just getting started here. That's going to give you your blood work. So you get stool and blood, right? And you'll have a really good idea of what's going on that you can probably navigate yourself, right? So if it shows you're low in magnesium with your comp, okay, you're going to include some more magnesium. Or if it's saying, hey, these specific items are popped up and this is, one on your avoid list on Viome, well, you're going to avoid that food for a temporary period of season of your life, and you're going to see how you respond to it. I think with those two things, knowing what's going on in your body, you can build a personalized plan for you that is going to trump anything that I could tell you to do. I think there's way too many standardized dieting advice tips out there, and I think it's why so many of us yo-yo or we don't achieve the results that we're really seeking, is because we're not finding out what my unique body or what your unique body actually needs to arrive at an optimal state of health.
The easiest way to understand this, I think, for people is that we all know that some people are allergic to peanuts. They can kill you. And there's other people who can eat peanuts all day long and not a thing happens. And peanuts are just one food. But as you said, our bodies will get inflammation to a variety of foods. It just may not be as easy to see. In other words, some of the inflammation that comes from eating certain foods is slow to happen, or it's not as an anaphylactic type of response. Right. And so you don't notice that this is what's going on and these are the results you had. I actually had my biome done. It was done by a company called UBiome that's actually now out of business, and its founders are being hounded by the FBI.
I'd heard about that.
Yeah.
That sounded familiar when you said that. UBiome. I heard about this. They were in California, right?
They were in California. Yeah. So what they did...
Insurance fraud. Interesting.
They did insurance fraud, yeah. But what they did for me were they looked at my biome and they looked at bacteria ranges. But I don't know that they gave me food allergy stuff. Mm-hmm. But they did tell me what I was low. And so what I basically needed to start doing was eating active yogurt.
Got it.
But it did tell me that I didn't have any major issues. But I think I might have to go back and look at one that actually looks at food. I know there's blood tests that also show
food sensitivity.
The results for blood tests for allergies as well.
Yeah. You can get a food sensitivity blood test done, which I think is probably more accurate than the Viome. But again, when you start working with somebody in function, like let's say you just explode when you do these labs, right? You're going to spend for both of those, you're going to spend sub $400 to $500. If you just do Viome, you're going to spend sub $200. I think the windfall that you'll experience is going to create such an ROI. It's going to, like for me, people are like, oh my God, how do you eat the way you eat? I'm like, because the benefit, right? Like the results are so drastic. You get to the point where it's crazy. I don't understand this paradigm, how it happens. But I talk to people that are like really big health nuts like me, and they have the same experience anecdotally. But they're like, I notice so much more when I go back and eat crap. Like when I have a cheat meal, right? Like once a month if I have a cheat meal. Like they feel so bad, they just feel it to such a degree. But I think so many of us are eating poorly so often that we don't notice that we're like constantly in this fog of feeling like crap. We don't even notice it until you've really gotten optimal and feel what the other side. It's like when the lights are on and then all of a sudden you turn them off, you're like, oh my gosh, there's such a radical difference versus they were just dim all the time. So that to me, you're going to experience such windfall, such an ROI, especially if you're an entrepreneur, because you're going to now function at such a higher level, right? You can't create more hours, but you can create more energy, you can create more vitality, you can create more epiphany moments through achieving optimal health, right? Or at least close to optimal health. Even normal health, normalcy would be probably a step up for most of us. That you're going to then be like, how do I get more of this, right? So like I pursue it tenaciously. My workouts have never been better. Now, this is off the tail end of a health crisis where I was trending on literally dying by 40 or 50. Literally, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say that. That's how bad things were. To now having better workouts when I was 17 or 18. I can show you pictures where I look younger now than I did 10 years ago. 100% this is the healthiest I've ever been in my life. So it becomes so fun to feel good. That's what you're addicted to, not to, and plus you address all of those deficiencies. So a lot of these cravings that we have, carb cravings, sugar cravings, etc., they come from deficiencies that you haven't addressed in your body. You should not have cravings for anything in particular. You should not have cravings. Like, that's not a normal human response. It's because your body is trying to acquiesce to a deficiency that it has, right? So once you address those things, you don't have those, and you start really looking at food as fuel versus just enjoyment and pleasure. And I'm not saying I just eat cardboard all day and it's gross. Like, I enjoy food as well, but the benefit to feeling good is so profound that you'll literally be like, this is poison. This junk food is poison. I don't even want to see it. It's so gross. I don't even want to look at it. So I promise, if you get to that point, you'll want to delve in and then start spending the money that I spend, which is like $5,000 to $10,000 a year, to work with somebody that's highly skilled in functional medicine to be able to kind of help me craft my plan for my life.
Who are you working with, out of curiosity?
So I bounced around a little bit. Progressive Medical Center is who I work with for a while out of Atlanta. They're great. But actually, I have a personal physician now, Dr. Jason McCloskey. He's in the West Palm Beach area. So happy to provide an intro if anybody's interested in working with him. He is one of the more brilliant minds when it comes to health and wellness that many people probably don't know about, because he's not one of like the celebrity names in the space.
And you don't need celebrity names, people who actually understand medicine. And your doctor tends to treat symptoms versus actually treating the underlying conditions. And we've had some functional docs on, and it makes a dramatic difference. And the one thing you said, when we feel a certain way, as you said, we don't realize that this isn't the way we're supposed to feel. We've forgotten what that is. And
exactly,
I've been digging through this. I know you're a fan of Ben Greenfield, and I've read a lot of stuff of his as well.
He's great.
And I think I've got a couple things that I'm working on right now with some cleanses and stuff. And once I go through that, then I think it'll be time to get the full blood workup and see actually to a greater level what's going on.
Cool. I commend you. That's a great pursuit.
Look forward to it. So you've had a lot of great guests on your show, and I know you follow a lot of the same people I do: Brendon Burchard, Brene Brown, Tony Robbins, Michael Hyatt. So what are your biggest takeaways from all of these people? And I'm going to ask that in a slightly different way. Like, what are the big takeaways that are counterintuitive to what everyone else is doing?
And that's a really, really tough to put all those people in one box.
You don't have to pick them all. I mean, I'm just,
I would say the big thing is this is the first thing that comes to mind. So I'm going to go with this, because I think this is really what I'm seeing with a lot, specifically with our dopamine pursuing cultural, ADD that we all have now, is all those people you just mentioned. Every single one of them have established what's called domain expertise, right? They have completely immersed themselves in their pursuit of the thing that they really care about. And the reason I say that is because they didn't become popularized because they just exploded on Instagram or went viral on TikTok or whatever the case may be. Now, many of them have built an audience on those platforms, but it really comes down to the fact that they've established what they care about, right? The problem that they want to fix in the world, right? And they have served at such a high level, right? Meaning they have now mastered their area of expertise to such a degree that they've become a go-to source for that particular area, that people know them for that. When you say unleash the power within, immediately you're like, oh, that's Tony Robbins, right? You know that. You know what they're known for. When you hear people talk about vulnerability and leadership, you think Brene Brown immediately, right? You think about performance habits or habits in general or becoming a peak performer, you think about Brendon Burchard, right? So they have really... We tend to just jump at the next big thing that pops at us, the next shiny object that pops up at us, versus really committing ourselves, right? And I think we're kind of in this microwave community of like, we think that we should explode and have this rampant growth. And if we're not, 1.5 million subscribers on YouTube within the next 6 months, it's not a worthy pursuit. Dude, Tony Robbins was out there like door to door, busting it for years and years and decades to establish where he is in the world. They have committed themselves to that lifetime pursuit. And every single person you just mentioned has that one thing in common. They figured out what it is they care about, the problem they want to solve, and they've dedicated their life to doing so. Now, it's a little bit different, and I don't want people to be like, oh, but there's nothing that in one particular, like I'm this way. There's nothing in particular that I'm like, this is the one thing that I'll pursue the rest of my life. That bores me to tears. Like I don't want to fit myself in that box. So you just have to figure out then, what is it that I really want to do? For me, it's building businesses. It's creating impact and influence. That can apply to a lot of different things. That doesn't necessarily have to apply to one specific avenue or one specific area. Now, there's probably a reason why my messaging has changed a lot on social. My messaging has changed a lot on these different podcast appearances and stuff that I've done. But I have really focused on how do I take and hyper-focus my energy on building disruptive things in the world, of which I do many of, and then going off and then creating, right, something, but full immersion in those things that I do. Not being distracted, full immersion in that season of my life on that particular avenue. And I think so many of us were unwilling to go deep, right, because we're seeing all these bells and whistles on these social media platforms and tools and stuff like that, versus being like, I'm committed to really going deep, slowing down, and embracing this season of my life. I think that's what they all have in common.
And I know all their backstories. Each and every one of them struggled
Mightily.
Massively at some point or another throughout their life. A few of them had serious health issues. So yeah, it's never the perfect easy path, right? It's not the Instagram path. And we say winning at Instagram is like winning at the game of Monopoly. It's all fake. There's no real money there.
Yep.
We always like to get people to take action. What's one action step people can take this week to move forward?
I'm a big believer in habits. I think we grossly overestimate willpower, motivation, discipline. I think that we just inherently think that these people we respect and admire, they just intrinsically have that. They just walk around as drill sergeants, just pumping themselves up all day, listening to jock jams or whatever, they pump themselves up with. I'm a big believer in habits. And so what I would do if I were you is figure out and you can read the book, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. It's a phenomenal read. But figure out what your keystone habits are, because what they have found through studies and research, not subjective, opinions, is those keystone habits have a domino effect on everything else in your life, right? So figure out what those main keystone habits are for you, and then start developing success habits. Success habits will outweigh any of these little spurts you have of motivation or discipline or momentum, right? Like all these things that we think we need. Focus on building really, really strong success habits. Are kind of at the same time, juxtaposed next to that, figure out what are your bad habits right now that are preventing that from happening, right? So arriving at habits are great, but let's figure out what are the habits that are preventing that. So I'll give you an example. No one is more addicted to their stupid phone than me. No one. One of the things that I've been doing that's helped me out tremendously, I have addictive personality. I think a lot of entrepreneurs do. We have very addictive personalities, and that's why we're able to go into such extremes to create growth and create this new thing, because we just literally obsess over it. So I think it's a powerful thing, but it can also become your Achilles heel. So I have to protect myself. I have to use that amazing obsession towards things that are positive and channel that, right, by removing things that maybe pull that away to less fruitful areas of my life. So during the day, every single day, my phone's on Do Not Disturb. If you call my phone, there will be no buzzes, no pings, no bangs, no notifications, nothing. And I've even gone so far, because that wasn't even enough, to literally leave my phone downstairs, right? I work upstairs. We have home offices. Not even keep my phone near me. One of the biggest disruptors to flow state, which we all know is like, a flow researcher came on my show. He said, you're 300% more productive in flow than when you're not in flow. One of the biggest disruptors to flow is, guess what? Technology, primarily the phones, interrupting that flow from happening. So that's a huge, huge opportunity that a lot of us are taking advantage of. So that's just one example. Maybe there's others for you specifically. Maybe there's bad habits that are popping up into your life. Diet could be one of those things. Maybe you have, obsession with drinking Coca-Cola, and that's really causing you to have a lot of brain fog or a lot of fatigue or a lot of issues, right? You're up and down, you're irritable. Figure out what those bad habits are, and then rather than try to take them all on at once, right? It's like going to the gym and trying to lift 500 pounds. Like, it's not going to happen. How do we start with the easiest one first? Right? Like, what is the one habit you're like, oh, like I do this and I know that I do this, but it's really not that big of a deal. Like I get kicked that easily. And then for the next month, that's what you're focused on. You're going to eliminate that habit. Read the book Power of Habit because it's going to help you. Like most people try to just quit things cold turkey. And one of the things he recommends is substituting with something else, right? So if you have a certain habit that's a bad habit, I think the example they give is like eating chocolate. Try to replace it with strawberries. Don't just try to say, well, no more chocolate, right? Like don't be a masochist. Work with yourself. It's a negotiation, not a demands, right? Again, going back to like the trying to pump yourself up, like work with yourself, understand yourself, quit working against yourself. Be your ally, not your enemy. So going through that list, how can we create these substitutes or start to tweak bad habits into maybe more positive habits, right? Building momentum towards building those success habits that you actually need to be successful. If you can work on that and build really, really, really solid success habits, right? I think what you're going to find is that the beneficiary of that is everything else externally that you do, including your business, including your family life, including your relationship with your friends, including your overall happiness with your life and what you're doing and your productivity and all these various aspects. It starts with that and works outward, not the other way around. So I could get into, I'm a big believer in planners. I'm a big believer in journaling. I'm a big believer in all these various aspects. But I think fitting those inside of that habit bucket is where I would start.
And it's what we do every day that determines the results of the life that we end up living.
Yeah.
What's your secret to living an abundant life?
This would have been a completely different answer for me throughout whatever season of life that you asked me to. But my secret is fully maximizing and embracing whatever season I'm in right now. And let me qualify what I mean by that. I think many of us, specifically entrepreneurs, we're always focused on tomorrow. We're focused on 5 years. That's our job, right? Like it's our job to focus on what the next 3 to 5 years looks like. You can end up in this pursuit that drives you crazy because you keep moving the goalpost. You're never where you want to be, and you never are fulfilled because it never feels like you've achieved or accomplished what it is that you set out to accomplish. So embrace the season that you're in. Make your big goals into small goals, making them more tangible, and then make sure that you celebrate it when you achieve those things, right? Like I'm new to YouTube. I just started a YouTube channel like a year and a half ago, and I just got 1,000 subscribers. We celebrated the hell out of that. Back in the day, I'd have been like, 20,000 subscribers. I need to have 100,000. And so I'd be this masochist in my own pursuit. And the reality is that that's a big milestone. That's part of the journey. So celebrate the journey, celebrate the season you're in, really celebrate the wins, focus on what you're grateful for. Gratitude is a tremendous practice. All of those things are going to make you feel like I live an abundant life. I'm happy with where I'm at. Obviously I have goals and I'm not compromising on those things. But right now, today, here, I'm living in abundance. I'm living in fulfillment with what I have right now and all the things that I'm grateful for.
Be present in the moment and enjoy it. Happiness is now, not when fill in the blank occurs.
Right.
And you've got to learn to live that. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
As it relates to business or as it relates to personal or just anything in general?
Anything in general.
My gosh, that could be so many things. I've learned so much. I would say this. This is the one that's come to me. I just kind of had a little moment of meditation on that, and I think this is what comes to me. We try to do things absent of our faith in a lot of ways, right? Like we lean on our faith when we need our faith, when things aren't good, when we're down in the trenches and face down in the mud. Then it's like, okay, God or whatever, universe, whatever it is you believe in, like I need you, help me. But if you can learn to every day submit yourself to what it is you believe in, something bigger than you, not only does that help you realign yourself with your purpose, but it also enhances your abilities, your thinking, instant peace. I mean, if you want true, this is how anecdotally, I mean, obviously I can speak to this, but like I know there's a divine presence in my life when I have those moments. Like I just know that. It's taken me this many years to get to the point where I've learned that I need to submit myself to that and lean into that every single day. So I could give you a million little hacks and strategies and stuff that I've learned, but at the end of the day, that's the one thing, right? I always try to focus on that. The one thing is my favorite business book of all time, The One Thing by Gary Keller. What's the one thing? And I would say that is leaning into my faith every single day, committed to that, because everything else will take care of itself.
And I think people need to figure out what their faith is and then live in alignment with it. And I think for some people, that's a struggle. They've never actually thought about it. And you have to do that.
I don't know how you do entrepreneurship without faith. I honestly, I think about the things I've been through. And I'm like, this would be such a dire. It would all feel like meaningless, right? It just wouldn't. Like I wasn't working towards anything. So, yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's your pursuit. Then is what is it that I believe, right? And fully aligning yourself with that. That's way more important, profoundly important, I think, than we ever. Definitely in relation to the amount of time we give it every day, for sure.
So true. If you were
at least for me, only speaking for myself here.
That's fine. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Go screw up. Go screw up. Go try. Go to New York. Try to flip some clothes on eBay. I think we all feel this tremendous pressure to like have it all together, especially at 18, right? Like you got. I would say this: 18 to 30, you got to figure out what you like. You got to roll up your sleeves. You got to try a lot of stuff. And I'm not, when I say go screw up, I don't mean like go bankrupt yourself and buy cocaine and do all kinds, that's not what I'm saying. What I mean is truly explore what you want to do in this world, the areas that you want to make an impact, the areas you want to have an influence. Figure out what those important things are to you. And then by the time you're in your 30s, you're going to be building, right? You're going to be building towards creating that legacy for yourself, creating generational wealth for you and your family. But a lot of people, what they end up doing is they don't give themselves that permission to do that through peer pressure or through parental pressure or their own self-guided pressure. They don't allow themselves to really explore what they want to do. The problem is they get to 40 or 50 and they have that midlife crisis and they look back and say, oh my gosh, I've wasted all these years trying to stay on the straight and narrow and not really pursue what I want to do. Somebody told me this. I was on somebody's show last week or the week before, I don't recall which. They said that the definition of hell is getting to the end of your life and meeting the person you wish you had been. And God, I cannot say that better. Like I never want to get to the end of my life and think like what could have been. Like I could have been a better husband. I could have been a better father. I could have been a better entrepreneur, right? And it's not to say that means that you have to achieve these goals, right? It just means that you have to pursue them to the best of your ability. And whatever it is, whether you become a millionaire, a billionaire, or a thousandaire, it doesn't matter. The fact that you tried and you pursued your heart, your desires, what you feel like you were divinely crafted to do in every which way of your life, right? Both personally and professionally. It starts with first figuring out what the hell that is. And I think not enough 18 to 30-year-olds have given themselves permission to just pursue that.
And that's very true. I think your 20s should be all about pursuing and learning and not chasing after the goal yet. Figure it out first. If people would like to learn more about you and your work and your podcast, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, so at HeyCMH on all social media platforms. If you want to get a little bit more specific guidance, so if you're actively looking right now to transition from job into a business, you're like, man, I've really done that. I did that work. I'm 27. I'm approaching my 30s, and I really know that I want to do this thing, but I'm kind of scared to start a business. I have responsibilities. I don't want to be kicked out of my apartment because I can't pay rent, right? We created something for you called the Ultimate Startup Checklist, USC download, like University of Southern California, Ultimate Startup Checklist, download.com. That'll give you some blueprints. And then the cool thing is that we're literally about to release this. There's going to be a free class that we attach to the back of that. So you download it, you'll instantly get access to that free class. And it's going to be how to get your first 100 customers in 100 days without breaking the bank, even if you're starting from scratch. And it is literally, you talk about breaking a lot of narratives. We are going to destroy a lot of narratives that are out there about what success requires, chasing social media platforms, how to actually use data that exists on the internet right now to identify your market, to identify your ideal client avatars, and then to use that and build it into your marketing assets to start generating sales with or without social media. So it's a fantastic class. I spent a month just pouring into that. So I think you guys are going to benefit a lot from that. But it starts with uscdownload.com. And then I do have a quick favor, if I may, Rocky, 2 seconds, I'd like to ask of your audience.
Yeah, go ahead.
Guys, it takes 25 seconds, literally, right? 25 seconds, I promise you, to go do two things. And I'm going to explain to you why. I want you to hit subscribe, and I want you to leave Rocky a review if you feel like this has provided utility in your life. The reason being is because the podcast apps, whatever which one you're on, they use not downloads, but subscribers and reviews to judge where your show is showing up or whether it's trending or not. So if you could do that for Rocky, it means more to the algorithm than you may realize, and it helps him reach more people to help like you. So it's like leaving a tip for your waiter or your waitress. It makes a profound difference, maybe more than you think, and it's 100% free for you to do so. It takes literally less than 25 seconds. Leave a review and hit subscribe.
Thank you so much for doing that and for asking, and I appreciate it. And thank you so much for joining us today, Chris.
I enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. I want you to understand that life is about more than just profit, and we need to enjoy the journey. You can find more episodes like this on Richer Soul. Remember, you don't need more resources, you need to be more resourceful. We focus on the bottom line. If you want a done-for-you service, you can have me as your Chief Profitability Officer, because you have your zone of genius and want to spend your time doing what you love. I only work with a handful of clients, so they get my full attention. I work with business owners who have or are growing to $500,000 to $5 million in revenue. You can use the scheduling link in the show notes to get on my calendar for a good fit conversation to see if I'm the right person to support you and how I can help you. If you want to learn about living the life of your dreams, check out my other podcast, Richer Soul. As we close out, let's repeat the mantra. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. Have an abundant and profitable week.